The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
In fact, just the latest questions about transparency surrounding this White House, a White House that has promised repeatedly to be the most transparent in American history. Now, right before the show, I spoke with Ron Fournier. He's the executive director for the nonpartisan National Journal. He has covered 3 consecutive administrations: Clinton, George W. Bush, and now President Obama. And we talked about another major transparency controversy engulfing the Obama administration that you have to see to believe. You just wrote a new article about a fight that's going on between the White House and the journalists like yourself who cover it about access to photographers. And in a letter to the White House spokesperson, Jay Carney, signed by all major news outlets, including CNN, the letter says, as surely as if they were placing a hand over a journalist's camera lens, officials in this administration are blocking the public from having an independent view of important functions of the executive branch of government. You are, in effect, replacing independent photojournalism with visual press releases. And there were plenty of instances where the White House photographer gets a better vantage point than the press, right? Or the one that gives the image that they really want out there as opposed to a different image. The first one on the left will show the press version. On the right, the White House photo before the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial. Obviously, the money shot is the one from behind them where you see the adulation of the crowds.
Yeah, so what's happening there, first of all, I'll give you a little behind the scenes. There was a conversation that went on before that event where the White House said, yes, you can get behind the president and shoot out towards the mall. That's the shot you obviously want. We'll make sure you get it. It wasn't until they got to the scene that photographers were told, nope, you're not getting that shot. No explanation, no excuse. They were given a much worse shot in front of the president. So what you have there is those pictures are both distributed, one through the wire services and through the normal channels, through the news media channels, one through social media, Flickr and Facebook, and everyone is choosing the best photo. They're choosing, if you get a choice between the first one, which is basically just another picture of the president and the first lady, or this historic shot from behind, everyone, including, by the way, networks like yours and newspapers and news organizations that I work for, are grabbing off of social media the best picture, which is the propaganda picture, which is produced by somebody who's paid by taxpayers and who reports to the president to take flattering pictures of the president, not to have a skeptical eye, not to have a jaundiced eye, but to take flattering photos. So they arrange to have a monopoly on that day, and that just, it's a slippery slope, I think.
And certainly one, I mean, to your point, I think a lot of people, when they look at these pictures, they don't know who took it, right? They don't know which is the quote-unquote manipulated shot or the shot that the White House wanted out, as opposed to one that truly is, just a candid, right?
Now, one point I'd like to make, though, because I'm critical of the White House, but we have a responsibility in media, too, because what's happening is our editors and our producers are taking these pictures off of social media and putting them in our newspapers and putting them on TV. I think a lot of times they don't realize it unless they look at the caption.
Without clarifying.
Right, and what they're doing, what is the difference between putting a White House photo out there? What's the difference between that and putting out a White House press release and pretending it's news?
To your point, there is none. Now, there's another point that you make. This one's really amazing. I'll show again to our viewers on the left and the right. The left, this is what journalists were given, the access that our industry had to the president's trip to the Gulf Coast, him eating lunch. Right? Just that's it. And I know that the photographers were told, hey, that's it. He's not going to go swimming. Nothing else is going to happen. But obviously he did go swimming with his daughter, Sasha. And the White House took that wonderful picture. And that was the money shot. And then, as you point out, it's sort of a reminded, well, at least, take a look at the picture of Vladimir Putin frolicking in the water. Right? I mean, we make fun of those Vladimir Putin pictures all the time on this show and other places. But how is that any different?
Well, look, obviously you're not, and I'm not comparing the Soviet Union to the United States or Barack Obama to Vladimir Putin. That would be ridiculous. But what is also ridiculous is a White House in a democracy like ours that has a free and independent media, freezing out the media more than any president has. It's gotten worse the 3 presidents I've covered. President Obama is much worse than President Bush was, and Bush was worse than Clinton was. Freezing out not just our photographers, but also our reporters from events that we've covered in the past and we should be covering now. And it's not healthy in any country, certainly not healthy in our country.
And it's interesting, and I know you say, look, I mean, it's not fair in many ways to compare the U.S. to Russia, but There are some similarities when you look at the pictures. I mean, one of the most iconic photos of President Obama, the first African-American president in United States history, is this one, as you point out, looking out the window of the Rosa Parks bus, alone. I mean, it's an incredibly poignant image. And you wrote, it's a great photograph, but as a matter of public record, it is no better than beefcake photos of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Well,
in other words, this was completely and utterly staged.
Right. It's staged. It's shot by an agent of the government, paid by taxpayers, whose job it is to flatter the leader. That is propaganda. That's a state-run media. And with social media, which, by the way, nobody that I know has a problem with the White House using social media, but they're doing that in connection with, or at the same time that they're locking us out of the events. So when you're using social media to push out these images and push out this printed content, he's running, in effect, what is a state-run media organization. And the slippery slope, the next president, the president after that, as they get more empowered with these new technologies and the new media, and weaken us and shut us out of more events, you know, where will we be a generation from now? And that's what I worry about.
And let us know what you think about that in those pictures. The White House was asked about this issue of access. The spokesman responded, quote, "There are certain circumstances where it's simply not feasible to have independent journalists in the room when the president is making decisions."
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.